So now we're on to discussing the design of birds, reptiles, and fish, as well as the design of mammals. And these are the last designs of different forms of consciousness that we're going to discuss before we get to discussing about mankind, about human beings, and the evolution of consciousness in human beings through different forms that we've existed in. But I think these last two forms of consciousness start to get more and more nuanced and interesting because the genetic matrix, as you can see, is slowly opening up. At first, we talked about the design of the inanimate, which is a one-gate matrix. Then we moved on to the design of cells, which is a three-gate matrix. Then we moved on to the design of plants, which is a four-gate matrix. And then we moved on to the design of insects, which is a six-gate matrix. And here we are looking at the design of birds, reptiles, and fish. And here we have a seven-gate matrix. So we can see that forms have an opportunity to get more and more diverse and also to display more and more cognition as they evolve. What we've also seen is this evolution of the first two forms just being design consciousness and then a personality being integrated in the next few forms, which again shows up differently in every single form. We also see that the crystals in these different forms of consciousness actually interact with the neutrino stream differently. Inanimate objects, cells, insects, and human beings all receive their neutrino information at an 88-degree angle. Plants receive their neutrino information from the earth, and birds, reptiles, and fish actually receive their neutrino information from the east. I really wish that Ra had given some more commentary on this aspect because I find it very fascinating that if I am sitting in a park and there's a bird that's sitting in a tree beside me, that bird is going to receive its imprinting from one side, whereas it gets dropped into me vertically down from above. Anyway, what we can see here, just like we saw in the design of plants and insects, is that we have a design crystal and we have a personality and we have a magnetic monopole. By the way, I am not sure about the placement of the design crystal and the personality crystal and exactly which center it's going to be in, because it is not mentioned in any of the official sources of Ra, but Martin Grasinger, who was one of the first students of Ra, actually showed these placements in one of his courses. So that's where I've got it from. However, I've also found a contradictory placement specifically for that of mammals in this book that Eleanor Porter published about the mammalian design. And there's some tea on Ra's relationship with this woman and all of that. I'm not going to get into that. My point being is that we know the magnetic monopole is always going to be in the G center. However, wherever I've put the design crystal and the personality crystal, take that with a grain of salt. Just understand that they exist in different centers because that's a necessity for life to exist, but that I'm not sure about the exact placement of them. Getting back to the design of birds, reptiles, and fish, we can see that similar to the design of insects, we have a splenic center, we have a sacral center, we have a G center, and we have a throat center. However, as we can see, the genetic matrix that's available to birds, reptiles, and fish is actually different from the genetic matrix we've seen be available to the forms that came before this form. We can say that gate 44 is actually a gate that is unique to this form. And gate 44 is about the fear of extinction. It is about the fear of being eaten. It is the instinct to be alert so that you're not eaten. And what we can see here is that the cross-spatial connection to other forms is actually only to one form, and that is to humans, because it is only human forms, human beings that have an ego center or have the capacity to have a defined ego center. So what we can see here is that actually birds, reptiles, and fish are designed to, in a sense, interact with human beings and in a way to be eaten by human beings. Ra talks about how the human mind morally struggles with its consumption of meat and of birds, reptiles, and fish. But actually, when you look at the design, it becomes very obvious that birds, reptiles, and fish are designed to interact with human beings and to interact with the 26, which is associated with the T cells, which is actually quite an aggressive mechanism in human beings. A lot of people talk about how red meat or different kinds of meat bring out the aggressiveness in human beings, while actually it is consumption of birds, reptiles, and fish that actually increases heat within human beings and aggressiveness within human beings. Birds, reptiles, and fish also deal with the fear of the unexpected through the gate 57. By design, birds, reptiles, and fish are rather fearful animals. And I think in our experience as well of dealing with them, it's so easy to frighten a bird and a fish and even some reptiles, right? It's because they consistently live with the fear of being eaten and with the fear of the unexpected. And this is also why Ra says that they live by the law of adaptation, is because they're constantly having to deal with the unexpected and adapting to changes in their environment is built into them. What we also see here is the gate 34, and this is the power to proliferate. This is the power to reproduce, and to reproduce in a collective fashion, as we have seen in so many other forms. But what is really unique about birds, reptiles, and fish is that instead of going this way to the 10 and the 20th, as we see in insects, this penetrating presence in the now, what we see here is that birds, reptiles, and fish have the capacity to actually uniquely express themselves and to imprint others in their species with their unique expression. This is the first form in the evolution of forms that we've seen so far on Earth that has a unique expression which is individualistic in nature. Actually talks about the 4 different ways in which birds actually express their unique identity. Then the first one is related to expressing what kind of species it is. The second one is related to expressing what gender it has. The third one is related to expressing if it has territory or not, or if it's ready to mate or not. And the fourth one actually is such a sweet one. It is the bird's personal song. And every single bird, provided it has the right activations, is capable of having or singing or humming its own unique song. So this is the first form of consciousness that is capable of having some kind of a unique identity or express itself uniquely, even though it's part of a deeply collective species. And then birds are also capable of mutating its future generations through imprinting that happens through the eighth gate. In addition to birds, reptiles, and fish having the ability to express their individuality, they also have the ability to imprint future generations, which is not something that we've seen previously in any of the forms before. And as we can see through the definition, this is the definition of a manifesting generator, even though most birds, reptiles, and fish will probably be reflectors as well. But what we can see through that is the continuation of this theme of building and building quickly, populating the earth and populating it quickly so that different forms can evolve and come into being. And now looking at the design of mammals, mammals receive their conditioning from the West. And also you can see that instead of having the design crystal in the sacral center, I have it in the splenic center. And I have the personality crystal in the root center, which is a center that hasn't existed before in any of the previous forms. And again, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but this is what is there in the book published by Eleanor Porter, which is specifically about the mammalian design. Like I said before, we now have a root center that hasn't existed before in any of the forms of consciousness yet. So we can see that the genetic matrix is expanding even more, and actually it's expanded by quite a lot, because so far we've had forms of consciousness that have 1, 3, 4, 5, or 7 gate potentials. However, mammals actually have a 16 gate matrix. What also makes this design very special is that human beings actually go back to the mammalian construct that we see in front of us when they are horizontal. And it doesn't matter if we're sleeping or not. When a human being lies down in a horizontal position, a lot of our genetic capacity shuts down or closes down, and what remains is the activations that we have in the mammalian form. So essentially, every single human being actually has a living mammal inside of them when they're horizontal, asleep, or awake. What's also interesting to note is that mammals are ruled not just by the sun, but through a juxtaposition between the sun and the moon. And what I mean by that is when we calculate the design of most forms, we calculate the personality activations by looking at where the sun was 88 degrees before birth. But when it comes to mammal, although the design activations are concluded by looking at the position of the sun, the personality activations are actually calculated depending on where the moon was 88 degrees before its birth. So what we have here is a completely different way of calculating a mammalian chart that we haven't seen before. I think it's fair to say that the moon actually has a relatively deep impact on the personality of mammals. I find it really fun to look at this genetic matrix of mammals because so far, a lot of the forms that we've looked at, even though there is a capacity to really understand them and interact with them, engage their consciousness, I personally found it the easiest to look at the design of mammals and really understand how it shows up. Because even though some people are in close contact with birds, even have reptiles as their pets, and consume fish often or harvest them, I personally have only always been in close contact with mammals and hence have been able to observe some of the things that we're going to talk about here. So let's begin with gate 19. And actually, before talking about the gates and the channels, I just wanted to point out that we can see here that mammals are actually not emotional themselves, but they're open to absorbing the emotions from their environment. They're also open to taking commands, also open to recognizing mental patterns and being able to work with them. Now, from our investigation from all of the other forms, we know that there is no other form of consciousness that actually has an ajna center or has a solar plexus other than human beings. So what that really means is that mammals are designed specifically to interact with human beings in a really deep way. This is not to say that mammals don't interact with other forms of consciousness. However, it is their relationship with human beings that is of high significance. Gate 19 is the drive to be fed, the drive to look for food. And this is the first gate that actually opens up the potential for human beings to bond with animals. Human beings can give animals a safe territory and provide them food in that safe territory, provided that they get something in return from the animal. So this inherent need for the animal to be territorial can be fulfilled through its connection with human beings. Now, obviously, the bargain is that human beings give animals territory and food and safety until they need to eat one of them. And this is why we see that mammals are designed to be domesticated in return for a safe territory and food and other resources. Now, granted, not all animals are designed to be domesticated. However, there is this inherent capacity here for human beings and mammals to interact and to benefit each other. Something to notice about an animal that has the 19th gate is that these are generally animals that are going to be very aggressive about their territory. In fact, this is where this need to mark your territory actually develops. Mammals also have the potential to have the channel of struggle, and it is this channel that empowers hunting and other survival skills in mammals. 38 is the gate of aggressiveness. So any animal that has this activation is going to be fierce, is going to be a snapper, and they might not necessarily bite, but we know those mammals that are unnecessarily, in our opinion, on edge. It's because they're fearful about their survival and they don't always know how to deal with that fear unless, of course, they have this entire channel activated. 28 in mammals is this acoustic listening. And we see this so evidently in certain animals that before they sit somewhere or before they go somewhere, they have this moment where they just stop to listen. And once they feel that it's safe to proceed, that they do so. And if they feel like it's not, they don't. So this is the channel that empowers mammals to learn what they need for their survival, to listen intently for what is safe for them or not, and to hunt if needed in order for their survival. Mammals also have the channel of preservation, and this is the channel that's responsible for herding and reproduction. Any animal that has the 27th gate will be an animal that likes to be in community. This isn't necessarily an animal that you can leave alone or that likes to be left alone. This is an animal that likes to be part of a herd, that likes to be part of a community. This is an animal that's going to, like, if there is a bunch of people sitting around the TV on the couch, this is an animal that has to be in the middle of the community and to feel like it's a part of something bigger. These are also animals that are happy to herd with other animals. 50, on the other hand, here is responsible for reproduction, and these are your humpers. These are animals that are designed to be reproductively quite active and actually are the best for breeding and are capable of breeding even in really difficult circumstances. Mammals also have the channel of maturation, and this is the only format channel that mammals can have. And so far, in any of the forms of consciousness, we've not seen a format channel. And the one we see here is this channel that wants to be in a cyclical process, that wants to go through a maturation process. Gate 53 is the gate of freedom. So this is an animal that does not like to be caged, that does not like to be put in a corner, that does not like to be locked up, that does not like to be confined in any way, shape, or form. And actually, an animal that has this activation that is locked up or kept in confined spaces or chained is an animal that has the potential to get depressed because they're here to be free. And these kinds of animals will really benefit from having an open space where they can enter or exit at any time. And that even if they don't want to, just having the availability of freedom is absolutely necessary for their maturation process. They want different experiences through which they mature. An animal with gate 42 is an animal that, if is sterilized, is actually going to become really depressed. Reproducing and creating more offsprings is a huge part of a mammal's maturing process. And so if you have an animal with this channel, it is not recommended to sterilize them, and it is recommended to give them as much freedom as possible. Otherwise, there is a potential for them to become quite depressed. And then, just like all of the other forms, except for plants, we have the channel of rhythm, we have this fixed collective pattern, and this ability to magnetize others into their flow. A mammal that has gate 5 is going to be a really habitual mammal. This is a mammal, say, for example, that if you set the pattern that you're going to walk them at 5 o'clock, then they're going to get really upset when you break that pattern. It makes them really quite insecure, especially if you have a mammal around you that has the entire channel. This is a mammal that's going to pull you into its flow. So these are mammals that require you to make your life about them, that require you to do things that need to be done for them at the time that it needs to be done for, right? Otherwise, they're a very difficult animal to be around. Mammals also have the potential to have the channel of the brain waves, this penetrating event, this penetrating presence in the now. Again, mammals with gate 57 have this ability or attunement to listening. So these are animals that are actually very sensitive to your tone and can develop deep intelligence when it comes to surviving well in the environment that it's in, depending on what it listens to. Mammal with gate 20 is going to be a mammal that is intensely present in the now and can be relatively difficult to train because they might do the trick that you're trying to teach them in the now. However, they're so present with the now that there isn't really an ability to project that into the future, unless, of course, they also have the 62. But then again, if they're intensely present with the current moment, they might not respond to your command. So these are animals that are deeply sensitive and intelligent, but then sometimes have the potential to completely ignore anything that you're saying because they're so intensely attuned to something else that is important for their survival. Mammals also have 1/8, just like we saw in birds, reptiles, and fish. And it is this ability to have a unique expression and also mutative imprinting that happens through gate 8. Mammals can also have a hanging 62. And this is essentially another place where mammals are designed to connect with human beings and to connect with human beings in a way in which they can get really good at pattern recognition and projecting that pattern into the future. So these are mammals that are highly trainable. These are mammals that actually demand that you give them work, actually demand that you keep them stimulated, that you teach them tricks, that you give them order. This is where mammals have the potential to learn about the concept of time through their interaction with human beings. And then with the hanging gate 12, this is an animal's ability to develop individual friendship and connection with human beings. And I actually have gate 22 as well as gate 17 and have very much noticed that animals approach me with caution. Of course, they have the gate 12, but if they receive my social openness and my grace, then it's very, very easy for me to develop this individual personal bond that's really just quite loving. Like, I don't have the 49, so even when I had pets, it wasn't always me that was feeding the animal, but I was definitely the one that was loving on them and having individual quality loving time with them. And I'm also particular about training animals. I really enjoyed learning about the design of mammals because you can see that every single gate is something that you have probably witnessed in some mammal or another at some point of time in your life. And that now that you understand this, it's so much easier to witness them and to perceive their patterns and to allow them to be who they are. Another thing that's really important to remember when it comes to mammals is that mammals have a massive aura, almost as big as human beings. It's not like a plant, where their aura is compressed to the surface. Mammals actually have a huge aura. So every mammal deeply impacts us when they live with us and is deeply impacted by us. Say, for example, if a mammal that has openness here in the 2838, the channel of struggle, that if they are around someone that has the channel of struggle, you're going to find that they're going to be more fierce around you. Or if you have the 5027, they might hump you a lot more or act more sexual around you. So it's important to remember that mammals actually have a deep impact on us and we have a deep impact on them, and treating them according to their nature is very necessary. Otherwise, we might live with a super oppressed animal or depressed animal and obviously feel the brunt of that in our lives as well. Entering into a relationship with mammals correctly is very integral for your well-being, especially when you begin to understand the dynamics that are at play and the design that they have and how it interacts with our design. Another really valuable point to mention here is that the relationship between human beings and mammals is actually very special, because when we get to the future and discussing the cosmology that the voice informed Ra about, that eventually before the personality, the actual personality of this universe comes to life, that the last form of consciousness that is going to exist is something that's called the Eron, and we're going to talk about it when we get there. But actually, the Eron possesses design crystals that come from mammals. And so we don't know exactly what, but there is something that is inherently important in the relationship between human beings and mammals, because it is our design crystal, personality crystals, and the design crystal of mammals that are going to be part of the design of the Eron. I think it is very cool to be able to see these different forms of consciousness from the perspective of their design, and to begin to notice some patterns and to begin to recognize that everything that exists here has a purpose and that nothing exists in isolation. And every single form of consciousness, whether it is the inanimate or plants or insects or birds or reptiles or fish or mammals or human beings, that everything is designed to connect with each other and is designed to help each other evolve and is designed to help each other participate in this experiment of evolution of consciousness. And what is happening through the evolution of all of these different forms of consciousness is the development of cognition. And if we zoom out a little, it is the development of the Ajna center of this universe so that actually it can house a real personality that can truly be self-reflective.